Jennison, Asuncion. Keynote, Fireside Chat. Camp. Gold sponsors, ANZ, Intopia and Telstra. Silver sponsors, Canva and Coles. Supporters, Rumour, the design recruiter.
Thank you, Jennison. As you said, it is a very big trip to Australia.
But, I mean, it's all for good cause. Again, let's give a round of applause for the 10th anniversary. I mean, you know, every year is an opportunity to celebrate, right? But 10th anniversary is an amazing time to be out here. So thank you for having me and Joe.
It's fantastic. And I said, it's so wonderful and nostalgic because really Camp came out of Ali Bites and Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And of course, you and Joe are the founders of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or GAD. So tell us a bit about that history of where GAD came from.
Sure, and before I do that, I think that it's worth mentioning to the folks here in the audience that you and Andrew made the trip to San Francisco back in 2019. See, I did that check.
You did.
So it was 2019. So I run Accessibility Camp in San Francisco. And just a quick plug, will be held on May 29th. Despite any headwinds in the US, San Francisco is a little different in California. So people are invited to come to that. But yeah, you were there in 2019, so it's great to be back here for your event.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to get to your question about how did GAD come about, so I've been working in digital accessibility since 2006. I'm originally from Canada, and I was always trying to figure out unique and different ways to make accessibility more approachable to the everyday technologist. I didn't want it to be something where people felt like they were going to have WCAG shoved down their throat, or I was going to make them feel guilty or forced to believe that accessibility was the most important thing, that was the only thing they had to pay attention to. So I ended up attending this event in Washington, D.C. in 2009 called Accessibility Camp, and they basically said, show up, we'll feed you, and you'll vote on these topics, and we'll have sessions on accessibility. I thought that was really chaotic, but interesting enough for me to go. And so I went from Toronto to that. I got inspired by attending that and ended up helping organize similar events in other cities, and then brought it to Toronto in 2011. And it was in that year, in November of 2011, I was uncharacteristically at home on a Saturday night. And
yeah, that's pretty rare for you.
I know, right? And
anyone who doesn't know Jennison, he loves a good time.
Exactly. And so
be aware for tonight and tomorrow's drinks. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm loving the whiskey and the gin out here, by the way. But yeah, so here I was at home, and when Twitter was a thing, I was busy trolling Twitter, and I came upon this tweet, and it said something to the effect of, accessibility needs to go mainstream now. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I activated the tweet using my screen reader, and I came upon this blog post by someone I didn't know named Joe Devon. And he basically was talking about how he had worked in tech for so many years, and he himself had no idea what accessibility was until then, or around that time. And he bemoaned the fact that developers didn't know anything about what accessibility was and what a screen reader was. And he basically said, you know, we need an international day to just focus on accessibility. So here I was doing my thing, and I read this blog post, and I said, well, this is interesting. So I replied to the blog post, told him, yeah, hey, if you're serious, let's go ahead and do this, or at least talk about it. And then I think it was at least a couple of months later, we finally got time. We were both overly committed then, as we are now, and we got on the phone at the time, and we just started chatting, and we said, okay, let's do this. And so we did it. And we just randomly chose a date. I believe it was May 12th, 2012. Oh no, May 9th? Anyway, it was an earlier date in May. We just randomly chose it. And we said, okay, we'll just email and call people we knew in different cities and ask them to run an event on that day. And here we were. We did it. And in fact, we did have something, I'm not sure if it was Lisa or someone else actually ran an event in
Sydney.
It was in Sydney.
So the very first year, Lisa Herod ran I think she called it an accessible pub crawl.
Something, yeah. And I was like, why couldn't I come down for that?
Yeah. And I believe that is when, I don't know if it's that year or another year, where we did go to a pub and the lift was being used for storage. Real accessible.
But that's how it was. We ended up, and Joe and I, honestly, we thought this was going to be a one and done thing. It was just going to be it. But here we are. Next year, we're celebrating our 15th anniversary. So we invite everyone to help us. Thank you. And we just want to say thank you. We are always just surprised every year. We get new events and new venues and all that kind of stuff. And people who have been doing events for years, like you folks, just the fact that it took off the way it did. So here it was. We did it on this random day in May, and then we found out, again by accident, that we were bumping up against holidays in Europe. And so we ended up having to move it again. So I think it was the 9th, and we moved it to the 12th, and then we said, okay, we need to move it to a date where people will just remember, how to do this. So we just ended up standardizing it to the third Thursday of May.
Right. Yep.
And that was it. So next year, we invite everyone to celebrate in grand style for the 15th anniversary.
Fantastic. And that's certainly what inspired Ali Bites to start, which is, we wanted to celebrate Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And so it was the second year of GAD. We started Ali Bites in Sydney.
Right.
And then the following year, Adam joined with Ali Bites in Melbourne. And actually, all the way up until COVID hit, we added cities on for the Ali Bites event. So I think we got up to about 5 different cities. Perth, definitely Canberra, trying to remember them all.
Was Brisbane one of them?
Brisbane, yep, Brisbane, that's right. And I think the year of COVID, we were going to also have someone in New Zealand run a Bites event. But unfortunately, COVID hit, so we went online for a while.
Right.
And so we've come back and generally run Sydney and Melbourne each year again.
That's great.
So, yeah, it was fantastic. And so what impact have you seen Global Accessibility Awareness Day have on the industry?
Sure. Well, one of the big things that we learned over time was that people or companies and organizations were using GAD, the day, to basically either internally promote accessibility efforts to let other employees, in other areas know that accessibility was a thing, but also companies were using it to promote externally, like whether it was a new product offering or the fact that they were making their digital assets more accessible. So we found that companies were using it as a marketing opportunity, and that's amazing that people were doing that. And so I think that was one of the big things. And we would learn over time, companies like Apple and Amazon were running these big events. We know that Amazon is doing a whole month every year, and they call it GAM. So people are basically doing, and at this point, as long as people hold it, some companies and mostly schools actually in America are having to move their GAD event outside of the third Thursday of May because it conflicts with exams. So but as long as people either do it during the month or shortly thereafter, that's fine. But again, Joe and I are just always so surprised at the fact that people are doing it. And I think most recently in the last couple of years, impact-wise, we're seeing more events happening in countries where English is not the first language, which is amazing because that is really putting the capital G in global. So seeing things happening in in China, in PRC, and elsewhere in Korea and in countries in Africa and in South America, which is amazing to us. So having more global and having accessibility being talked about in different languages, I think is golden for us. And another thing impact-wise we're seeing is particularly the gaming industry is really picked up on GAD and really used that to really promote. And I love that because, you know, as much as many of us work on making digital stuff accessible in the kind of more serious realms, if you will, I mean, people with disabilities also want to have fun, right? They want to game, they want to socialize. So I think it's amazing that gaming particularly has really used GAD to focus attention on game studios and just gaming in general and what they're doing around accessibility.
Yeah. And so that's definitely one trend you've seen is, you know, first of all, you mentioned, you know, countries, you know, that were not English speakers sort of doing more events. And I think it's about 300 events, isn't it, that you have listed? About 150 in person and 150 online, I think. Yeah.
And it was amazing, even during COVID, like we thought that was going to be the end of GAD, but people took it online, and now, of course, we're doing more hybrid events and, of course, back to in person. And let's face it, there's nothing more nice than, if you can, to be in the flesh and chatting with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like this.
And so what other trends have you seen sort of come out as a result of GAD?
Right. Just no more than what I've just mentioned before. I would say, there I was answering your question.
No, that's all right.
But yeah, just a lot of that, and of course, as each year changes, you know, everything now is about AI. You know,
the whisper.
right, and all of that stuff. But I think every year it's reflective of what people are talking about.
Yeah. It's funny, I reflect, you know, you mentioned at the start about WCAG or WCAG and that, you know, when we started Bytes and also Camp, we had a lot of presentations that were focused around WCAG, you know, whether it was how to meet WCAG, how to test against WCAG, you know, this success criteria or the like. And what I've noticed, you know, is that we hardly get a presentation anymore that is really WCAG focused.
Right.
It is much more, you know, broader, about inclusive design, but also, you know, much more about how do we do this, you know, rather than, let's pick apart these standards and, you know, work out what to do for this success criteria.
Right. Now, all that said, I know you had earlier, before we started here, you had that intro thing.
Yes.
Which I think you'd agree with me is still important because the one thing I love now is we have so many more people joining the industry.
Yeah.
Coming from all different sectors, right? And so we still, I mean, for those of us, next year it will be 20 years for me working in this space. We cannot forget and we need to uplift all the new folks. I mean, I'm not sure how many people in this room are new to accessibility and digital accessibility, but I think, you know, we all started from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And we all started like having our own misconceptions and all of those things too, right? And so we still need to honor that. So that's great that you folks still have that early session. But to your point, I think seeing the maturity of the conversation, and particularly now, you know, as we move more to the AI stuff, and I think I might be answering one of your other questions.
Don't worry.
But I think the velocity, I mean, I work in Silicon Valley. In my day job, I work at LinkedIn. We're making sure as best we can to make our platforms accessible. But in talking to my peers in Silicon Valley, I think what we're dealing with, what we have been dealing with, but what we will be dealing with more so now more than ever, is the velocity of how fast stuff is going into production. Gone are the days where you had the luxury of time. You're now having people, stuff going from prototype to production is happening now within weeks. And I think we working in accessibility have to recognize and understand that. And it's we either come along for the ride or we need to step aside. There isn't going to be this opportunity for us to stop the train because it's already left the station, right? And so I think as we in accessibility, are learning as fast as we can about all things AI, we need to be sprinting as much as we might not like it, and I'm not saying I do, but I think one thing we all need to do is we need to move as fast as everyone else is, otherwise we're going to be left behind. And at the end of the day, then we're going to be leaving behind the people we want to help most, which are those of us with disabilities or impairments.
And so in your work, how are you sprinting beside,
Right.
all these people who are,
Right.
flat out? Because I know I feel it too,
Yeah.
just the pace and the velocity and keeping up with every new thing. I know Joe is going to be talking about AI tomorrow,
Yeah.
and some of the work that he's, doing in that space of AI and accessibility. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a nice dovetail into this. But, how are you sort of dealing with this yourself?
I mean, for us, the real-time way is, we've got Slack channels at LinkedIn for all, like a web, iOS, and Android, and we have people answering those questions. We've got those channels monitored all the time. And then we have 21 office hour slots, and we just make ourselves as available as possible. And we also have accessibility. Rather than having accessibility as a separate process, we have baked it into existing processes, which, I know a lot of folks in the audience are probably nodding and saying, yeah, we do the same thing too. So, we to the best we can, that's the way we're keeping up to speed. Are we catching everything? Absolutely not. But no one is, right? I have always believed that there's nothing that exists that's perfectly accessible for like any length of time, particularly now because everything is always being tweaked, right? Mm-hmm. Or there's always an experiment happening or things like that. Now, I remember back in the early days when I would say statements like that, I'd be pulled aside and tarred and feathered by some of the more, shall we say, the more passionate, yes.
There we go, that's a good word.
Yeah. And the true advocates, right, who believed and still believe that everything should be accessible from day one. And we all agree that is the gold standard that we're all reaching for. But when you're actually in the bullpen and you're actually understanding how things go, that unfortunately isn't always going to be the case.
Yeah.
So all you can do really is run as fast as you can and understand that it's not going to be perfect and be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I think that's the key thing.
Yep. I come back to, I think it's Merrill Evans,
Yes.
progress over perfection.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I must admit, I think sometimes as a community, we do get a little bit stuck in that forgetting about the progress side of things and really just focusing on that perfection side, right. and not, I guess, to come back to GAD, not celebrating also right. those wins, those things that we are doing, even if they're not perfect, they're better than yesterday.
Well, and if I could say, and this might be controversial, perhaps. Maybe.
That's all right. I'll tell you if anyone stands up and walks out.
Right, but I get it. We all want everything, right? We want it to be perfect because we don't want people with disabilities or impairments to be left behind. That's ultimately what it comes down to. But I think what's happening, and I can say this having been in this game for 20 years, perfection ultimately and having that mindset, and if some of you have that mindset, and if you're battling everything, like everything has to have alternative text and it has to be perfect and every heading level has to be the right level.
Yep.
You're basically setting yourself up for burnout. That's essentially what it comes down to.
Yep.
And burning yourself out is ultimately not going to help yourself or the community that you're hoping to serve either. So, people often ask me, like, well, what's the secret to, like, why I haven't burned out or anything like that?
And all the parties.
Well, honestly.
And the whiskey. And the gin.
It's all, no, seriously. We laugh, but it's all of that. We all have to remember that when we leave work, we all get it, accessibility is important, all that stuff, but you need to check out. And you need to be able to not respond to that Slack or that email at 5 p.m., 5 a.m., whatever, right? After work. And you can't react to every negative thing you hear. Trust me. You have to let it roll on you.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And then that's ultimately what you have to do. It's a job.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of discussion, I mean, about, burnout for accessibility and disability advocates. And I think you were at AliTO, and I think there was a presentation about
there's
that.
presentations every year. And it's interesting to me because I hear some of the people, who talk about it, and in my head I'm like, wait a second, but I know that you're one of the people who, is like burning the candle at both ends. But we all just need to, and particularly for the new folks who are coming into the field, those of us who've been in it long enough, we need to set the example, right? That there has to be that fine line. And again, I know that there are going to be some people who are shaking their head right now going like, you shouldn't be saying this. But I've been around long enough. Again, I can take the hits. But I say everyone needs a hobby outside of accessibility. We'll leave it at that. Should we talk about the foundation?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
How are we doing with time?
Oh, we're fine.
We are?
Yeah. Probably about, what time are we at? 20 minutes or so at least. So yeah, we've got time.
So when GAD had its 10th anniversary, again, because Joe and I are not busy enough, we said
what was that about, demonstrating what you, walking the talk and all that?
Yeah, but there's bevies involved.
Yes, okay, fair enough.
Right? But so Joe and I were like, well, we have to do something that's kind of big splash. And then we always knew people were saying to us, well, GAD is just one day and it has to be all year round.
Oh,
and we're like,
that's to your point about the negative criticism.
Yeah, right?
I remember reading many people, it's just one day. We shouldn't be celebrating today because it's every day.
And so Joe and I are like, okay, what can we do to sustain this longer? And so we said, why don't we start a foundation? So we did that. And so in 2021, in Vegas, see, we did it fun.
There's the bevies.
We launched the GAD Foundation. And if all of you point your browsers to gad.foundation, you can certainly read about all the stuff. But what we did is, the mission of the foundation is to disrupt the culture of digital product development to make accessibility a core requirement. So it's all about disrupting the culture because without making accessibility part of the culture, you lose it. That's kind of table stakes is the culture. So what did we do in the foundation? So we folded GAD itself into the foundation as one of the programs. But two programs that I want to draw folks' attention to here in particular are, one is something called the GAD Speakers Fund. And what we do is we provide up to $3,000 to anyone who wants, and now here, this room is likely more people here who work in digital accessibility. So if you wanted to present on a digital accessibility topic at a mainstream tech event, so nothing to do with accessibility, we would cover the cost of travel to make that happen, up to $3,000, whatever that is in Australian dollars, right? So all you need to do is apply to that. We still have one more award to give out this year, but we wanted to make it possible to increase the conversation. And on the flip side, we also offer the same opportunities for people who don't work in accessibility, who want to present at an accessibility event like the CSUN conference. So we do it both ways, and we also want to make it possible for people with disabilities to present at either. So that's the deal with the Speakers Fund. So we really encourage folks here in Australia to consider applying for the GAD Speakers Fund either this year or next year, okay? So that's,
and it's that whole, we often preach to the converted as the euphemism goes. And so, getting into those mainstream conferences, as I said, I really reflect on the fact that 10 years ago or so, in Australia at least, some of those mainstream conferences about user experience, for example, there was no talk of access, inclusion of minority groups, anything, like that. And I know there were many of us who were kind of, every year we went, right, we're putting in the proposal, and every year we went, oh, well, better luck next year, and it wasn't just me, it was, others. But the fact that both you're supporting it, but also, the fact that that has changed as well.
Oh my goodness.
And so you're really supporting that change that we have seen, in other conferences that aren't, focused in that access and inclusion area.
And so, just to give you examples, we sponsored a talk at a large info security conference this past year, which was the RSS conference. And last year we supported someone from Pakistan who spoke at a web, just a standard web standards conference here in Australia. So just to give you a flavor as to the types of events that we support. So I really encourage anyone here in the audience to check out GAD.Foundation and click on GAD Speakers Fund and apply for that. The other project that I wanted to draw attention to is something we launched last year, which was the Global Digital Accessibility Salary Survey. And I mention that because we only had 18 respondents from Australia last year. So how many people do you have registered this year here?
Oh, hundreds.
Okay, so here's the deal, all right? The survey is only launching broadly next week. However, those of you in this room, if you go to GAD.Foundation today and click on the GAD's, the Global Digital Accessibility Salary Survey, the survey is live. So please, I want to see more than 18 Aussies. There has to be more than 18 people who are willing to provide information about their compensation. And in all seriousness, the reason we launched this survey is because there are salary surveys for all different types of industries out there. I always say that the most important conversation you can have with a peer, or the most honest one you can have, is how much do you make? And I think it's so important because, particularly in accessibility, because many of us, I'm not sure how it is in Australia, but in America, what ends up happening typically is a company that wants to start working on accessibility will say, okay, we want to do this, but we need to get a hiring ticket of some kind. And they might get it as a designer, or they might get it as a project manager or whatever. And that's what they end up getting is, okay, I've got a designer, but the hiring ticket says designer, but what they really want is an accessibility SME. And you can tell this because you look at the job description and you look at the job title, and it says accessible designer. but you read the job description and it also says, would be good if they could do JavaScript, and they could run training, and they could do executive presentations, right? And you're like, wait, this is
detailed mechanic knowledge,
And they also want them to submit a portfolio, right? So anyway, long story short, we want to cut through all of that, and we ask a bunch of questions, but we ask, what is your base pay? What kind of benefits? All that kind of stuff. And to give you an example, even though it was only 18 Australian or folks who declared that they worked in Australia, the average salary was 154,103 was the in Australian dollars. The median salary was $143,000, and you can read all about it when you go to that Global Digital Accessibility Salary Survey. Once you've finished completing the survey, you can
get your priorities right.
Yeah, you can also look at last year's results, and we're partnering with WebAIM on that. And many of you may have heard of WebAIM.
Yep.
So they do all of the number crunching and all that, and we will be presenting the results of this year's salary survey at CSUN. I'm not sure, maybe by clapping, how many people will be going to CSUN next year? Anyone?
CSUN
A
conference?
couple? Golf claps?
Yeah.
Yay.
Tiny.
All right.
Not too many.
Yeah, a few. And we know it's a long trip.
Yeah.
Will you be there, Sarah?
Yes, I will. I will be at CSUN next year,
Nice.
and a few of us are going.
Cool.
But as you say, yeah, it is a bit of a long trip.
Yeah.
So it's always fantastic when we do have online events or the like that. Also, we can catch up on too.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are two of the events. I know two of the things. I know Joe will be talking about one of the other initiatives of the foundation, which is the iMac project. So I won't steal any thunder from him, but yeah. So again, GAD.Foundation. We're celebrating our 5th anniversary for the foundation. So it's going to be like a
It's all about the birthdays, isn't it?
Next year, a lot of gin, a lot of whiskey, a lot of A11Y or Ali.
Yeah, what did Jennison say to me last night? You can't sort of get drunk on wine, wasn't it, or something like that? It's like, oh no, there's no wine in this list. It has to be the hard spirits.
Yes, exactly.
No, I think that's great because, although it's great to know sort of the results of the previous survey, 18 is a pretty small sample. And I know there's a lot of variation, for instance, between, let's say, obviously I come from a consultant versus being an accessibility specialist in corporate and government.
And we account for all of that in terms of if you are salaried hourly as opposed to annually, we account for that in the survey as well. Mm-hmm. And we do provide information in like the, we present the salary data itself in the currencies of the different countries. But then in terms of the other data, that's more aggregated. But okay, so I'll say this much. If we get at least 50 next year, I mean, that might be enough for me to come and talk about results here.
Oh! Come on, people. We've got to get Jennison back.
All right, so at least 50.
Really, you just want me to plug this multiple times through the conference and on socials and that kind of thing. So you get
Foundation. Right.
Where's Crispy? Taking note of this? No, that's fantastic. And I mean, it's just great for the industry, Australia or otherwise, as you say, to have, a salary survey within our industry.
It helps us as accessibility folks, but it also helps companies who want to invest in accessibility to get a sense as to, what they should be thinking out from a budget perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So
what else?
What else? Perhaps we can go back to LinkedIn because you mentioned some of the things that you're doing to sort of keep up with that fast, rapid pace and do that support. But are there any insights you can give us to maybe things you've tried that haven't worked or maybe things that you would really love to improve?
Sure.
Without giving away the trade secrets.
I know, or getting myself fired.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
Let's see. I think the one area where, at least, where let's talk about the successes. I think one thing that I'm most proud of is early on, this was back in 2018, we knew we needed to scale up our accessibility efforts. And we had a small team at the time of only, I think we were 5 folks. And we have over 200 products at LinkedIn. I know people see LinkedIn as LinkedIn.com as one big thing or the LinkedIn app. But there's like 200 products. And so that means multiple teams and blah, 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 right? And so what we did is we initiated, before it was cool, we initiated our own Accessibility Champions program. And that is even going up until now. It is kept up to pace up until this year. And what we do is we have, there's a mentoring component to it. Every champion has to go through, if they haven't gone through training already, they have to take fundamental accessibility training, and then they have to take a choice between either improving the accessibility of their own product or feature or contributing to improving the accessibility of a product or feature outside of their own day-to-day work. And they have to spend 20% of their quarter working on accessibility, and it becomes a part of their performance, their OKR, their performance goals.
Yep.
And I think that's really important, having that. And what that has done for us over the years is it's built a pool of engineers who, many of whom have moved to different teams. So they've been able to spread their accessibility knowledge that way. But then a lot of them have also moved up the ladder. You know, they've moved from maybe a junior, like a software engineer, to a staff level software engineer, or even higher. So that's great, right? Because you build the muscle amongst people. And it's also, people volunteer to be part of this. We're not forcing anyone to join the Champions program. Now, where I have fallen short is it has been exclusively within engineering. And so what I'd like to do is build that beyond to our design org and to our product org as well. So that's one thing that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that then 20% also is a commitment by LinkedIn as well to not just the individual, but also to accessibility as well.
Exactly. And they have to get their managerials okay to commit that time. So yeah, so that to me is one of our big success stories. I would say also, just like I mentioned at the outset, integrating accessibility into existing processes as opposed to building out accessibility as its own thing, because as soon as you make accessibility its own thing, it's easier to forget about. Whereas if you have it built in, we have it in our trust design review process. And so that includes things like security and other things. And so having it integrated there and having it like basically in that checklist, make sure that it's not ignored. Now, not every product goes through the trust design review, but it's something, right? And so, you know, where we could do better is to expand that kind of thing. So those are examples of that.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know that there are organisations we're working with at Intopia that are setting up champions programs as well. I must admit, I'd say a few years ago, there wasn't as many champion programs in Australian organisations. I would have said, you know, related to accessibility. But, you know, more people are focusing on that as a way to, you know, bring people together. And I think it comes back to your, you know, point about the culture as well. And building that culture of accessibility and really tapping into those people that are also passionate about it to start with.
Well, and that's the thing, because like, what I like about the Champions, our Champions program, and any of them, is what I always encourage people to do is just ask the question, because you'd be surprised at who will raise their hand, right? It might be the person you least expect, or you know, someone upstairs, downstairs that you would never think would be interested in accessibility. Will raise their hand, right, and do it. So. Again, it's also that concept of making accessibility much more approachable. And the other thing is, the dirty little secret that those of us who've been in accessibility long enough know, is that so many conversations happen that we're not invited to at the table, either intentionally or not, right? And by building a group of champions, whatever you want to call them, champions, allies, advocates, they are going to be the ones who are going to raise accessibility in those conversations where we're not invited to or we're not at. And we need that, right? We need people to be bringing up accessibility in all kinds of meetings, particularly at the ideation meetings, right? Or project kickoff. Where you know, accessibility typically, as much as we talk about it, we are still typically, in most cases, not in that kickoff meeting. Let's if we're going to be realistic and real, it's mostly true. We'll be in there, but maybe not at that initial meeting. And so the more we can get people involved, we just get them curious and interested and excited. We don't scare them, right? And we don't force them to remember, you know, 1.1.1 versus, you know, and all that. We get them curious, excited, interested, and that's how we really build allies. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right, but I also think that it is great then for multiple voices to be heard
Exactly.
talking about accessibility. And if I'm honest, not the, oh yeah, that accessibility person,
Yeah.
they're banging on about accessibility,
Yeah.
you know.
We want designers to be talking to designers.
Yeah.
Engineers to be talking to engineers. Product managers to be talking to product managers about it. We should be like maybe helping them like feed them script or answering questions. Like they could come back and say, hey, what was like someone asked this question, I didn't know how to answer it. That's what we should be really being in a supporting role.
Yep. Yeah. No, totally agree. So we're probably in the last few minutes. Let me ask the big question. What do you reckon the future of accessibility is going to be?
So obviously with you know what here, things are going to change, and you know, will it be good? Will it be bad? I think the jury's still out. I think the reality is that the way we do testing for accessibility is changing. I think what is being tested manually, you know, we keep hearing coverage will get better. That'll change somewhat. I think the one thing that I believe that AI will never, I never say never, right? But I think what AI will be challenged to replicate is really that lived experience of using assistive technology with a digital asset. You know, as much as we want to train people on how to use a screen reader or voice recognition software, and I'm talking about like your everyday engineer or designer, nothing will ever replace Joe or Joanne who has a disability, who uses these ATs 24/7, right? It just won't replace it. And I don't know how we could train a model really to know some of those nuancy things. But will AI help us by like being able to very quickly scan a VPAT or whatever you folks use here, your documentation? I don't know, what is a VPAT version here in Australia? Do you have it?
No, a lot of companies do use VPATs and
But is there an
ACRs.
Australian, I want to localize
No, we don't
here.
have. We don't have an Australian standard.
Okay.
No.
I want to be
Generally-
sensitive. So
No, we're just stealing.
VPAT.
We're just stealing yours.
Okay,
Thanks.
there you go. Well, yeah. So, but I think wouldn't it be great to just be able to have a VPAT be scanned by some sort of agent for those people in procurement who really don't know what a VPAT is, right? And when we're not available, I think it's going to help us make our time much more available to do more important things rather than having to help people look at things like VPATs or to answer those the quote unquote elementary questions and those types of things. But will it also help with testing? Absolutely. And looking at it as a person with a disability, for those of you who might be blind in the audience, I'm completely blind myself. So, you know, there are so many different ways where AI is helping now, you know, with people with different disabilities in our own, like consuming the digital content. And I think a lot of that is pretty well known. But in terms of our industry, yeah, I think we all need to understand that things will change. I think what we do need to do, all of us, is we do need to understand the lingo, right? We do need to understand what is cursor, what is windsurf, all of those tools, even though we might not use them. We just need to know what it is so that we can we can sit and understand what the conversation is happening. Just how in like the last 5 years, many of us have been encouraging those people in accessibility to at least know some of the language of engineering and of design, just so that we know what people are talking about. I think we all need to take those AI courses and just understand what people are talking about and understand and start writing prompts and just doing those things just so that no one is left behind.
Yeah. And I think to your point, you know, I feel like all of us are advocates, you know, for you know, accessibility. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is, you know, we are still fighting, you know, the good fight for, you know, accessibility is more than conformance with
Yeah.
standards, for instance. So to your point about, AI not replacing, say, the experience of the individual. But I also reflect on the fact that we're still kind of struggling both, either as consultants or within our organisations, sometimes to get organisations to recognise the absolute criticality of involving users in that process. And so for me, one of the things that I keep reflecting on is that need to, yes, we absolutely need to, be on board, use AI to its best, whether it's, I think we were saying in Joe's workshop yesterday, and I said, if I don't have to say, your form label's not associated with your form field again, I will be happy. That is great. But at the same time, I don't want people to see accessibility again as a technical solution, just an AI one now instead of, something else, whether it's an automated, tool or a WCAG conformance, sort of requirement or that kind of thing. And so, I think we still need to be stressing that. And that would be the ideal, I guess, picture is, AI helps us with some of those sort of low-hanging technical, menial tasks, getting your form labels and your form fields, right. But, the ideal is scanning your VPATs, whatever it is. And as you mentioned, agents, and agents changing the way maybe we do consume information, which I know we spoke about last night. But then, really saying, well, that's great if AI can speed that up, but let's invest more in getting that feedback, from individuals, doing that discovery, understanding the experience, validating the experience with real people.
Exactly.
I think that's a good note to finish on.
Yes.
Yes.
Before I get myself into any trouble.
Thank you so much, Jennison.
Sure,
it's been amazing to spend the time with you.
Yes, and just a reminder, GAD.Foundation.
Survey.
50 responses, and I'll be on a plane.
Right.
I'll be back here next year, and we can talk about the results.
We would love that.
Wonderful.
AliCamp, celebrating 10 years.